Our next presenter is Rik Lomas, who is a coder, teacher, and is also the CEO and founder of SuperHigh, which is an online education platform that helps and supports the creative industries. SuperHigh has thousands of students learning design and coding skills in nearly 80 countries worldwide, and the business has a fully distributed team working remotely in an online-first mode. Rik was previously the co-founder of Steer, a code school in London, and also an instructor at General Assembly. He's also worked at several early-stage startups and creative agencies. He was recently featured as a Sour Patch Kid in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Awesome. So, welcome. Good to have you. Awesome.
Okay. So, I'm going to start with the controversial title for this. So this is why I hate the title of this event, and 10 other things that I'll talk about a little bit later. So, hi, I am Rik. I do look like a soccer hooligan. My wife hates this new buzz cut that I've got, but she's got to deal with it. You might notice I am British as well. This is my family, my grandma on the far right there. And I'm not actually a designer. So just to kind of like hold my hands up before we start, I'm a coder. I do kind of creative coding, so I kind of treat it as design, but I also do teach a lot of design despite not being a designer. So just kind of quick backstory, I was born at some point back in the 80s. This is just a picture of me being a baby. What's this to do with the talk? Not really anything, just wanted to show a picture of me as a baby. Big fat 10-pound baby I was born, and then skip forwards 18 years. I did a math degree, or maths in English. I actually went to college in Durham, which is in the kind of North England. It was actually where Harry Potter was filmed, so I did technically go to college at Hogwarts. I hated doing my degree. It was like really theoretical and not very practical, and somehow I got to go as a creative developer in a job. Like someone hired me and I kind of liked it. It was a lot of repetition. We were doing the same kind of sites for different companies and doing the same thing over and over again, and I was like the worst dressed person, just like I'm in this room. So I had to leave and go to be the best dressed person at a tech startup instead. So I went to work for quite a few different tech startups in London. Most of them terrible and failed. One did pretty well, and I got nothing out of it because obviously I was just an employee. And over time, I started to work at General Assembly in London. I was the first instructor at General Assembly, teaching code in basically what was a warehouse at the time. They'd just launched in the UK. They didn't even have a projector. They had to steal a projector from someone else, and I was just teaching on some IKEA furniture. And over time, I was teaching all of these different lessons across General Assembly's campus from this warehouse into a kind of nicer space. And over time, I kind of felt, this syllabus kind of sucks. Like, why does it suck? And I told General Assembly, can we make this a little bit better? Can we make this syllabus even better, more creative, more kind of entertaining, more interesting for the students? And they said no. And the reason they said no is they wanted to keep the syllabus exactly the same worldwide. If we changed it, they don't want different outcomes in different places. So I was like, bye. And I started the code school in London. So me and my co-founder, we basically raised a tiny bit of money to get some space and basically started teaching people in person. So I teach 8 hours, 5 days a week in front of people in this classroom, and do that every week forever until we fell out. And then I left and I moved to America, and that's why I'm here. So I moved with my wife, who's probably baby Spice in the kind of picture, and basically decided to kind of change things up. Like, I wanted to do teaching still, but I kind of wanted to change how it was being taught. So back in 2016, I started a company called SuperHigh. And if you don't know what SuperHigh is, we are an online-only code school and design school for training creative people. And we try and focus on creative people specifically. Like, we're not trying to teach everyone in the world to code, we're just teaching creative people to code. And our kind of thesis is that everyone should have access to really, really high quality or super high quality education wherever they live. Now, there are 3 big whys about why we started SuperHigh in this way? Like, why didn't we just set up another code school, or why don't we just set up in the classroom? So there's three things I wanted to kind of do with SuperHi versus my old business. The first one was, why punish people for not living in some kind of Alpha plus C? Now, Alpha plus C is kind of the top 10 cities, so London, New York, Beijing, that kind of thing. But what happens if you don't live in one of these cities? Like, how do you have access to this kind of education? Number two, why make people pay extra in these kind of Alpha plus cities for a physical space? Because, you know, a lot of this money that people pay is going towards the rent. And three, why are we forcing people to be in a particular space at a particular day or a particular time as well? Like, why force people into a location at a time? And these are the things that I kind of wanted to kind of solve with SuperHi. So most of this is going to be talking about these 10 lessons that I've kind of learned over time from teaching from in person, as in the classroom, versus online. Now, these points won't be applicable to every single creative topic. Like, there are definitely topics that are more suited to being taught in a classroom. And this is just my experience as well. So everything I could say might be wrong. Like, this could be totally just all opinion. There's no fact, there's no kind of data for this. It's just stuff that I've learned over time. And last thing is, we are far from perfect. There's definitely things that we can do better. But we try the best we can, and we're trying to keep up as high quality as possible. So number one, how do you replicate a classroom experience online? First question is, can you do that? Can you actually replicate a classroom environment online? And the answer is no, of course you can't, because you're in a physical space versus an online mode. But can you provide alternate ways of doing this instead? Like, is there better ways that are completely different than doing a classroom experience? And of course, yes, you can. So some things that we tried and we still do is lots of these different kind of methods. And it's using a lot of these kind of futurist, kind of technological things like Slack. Like, we have a big Slack channel with all of our students in there. There's 3,000 people in our Slack group, which is kind of crazy, and kind of like, I get a lot of DMs all the time, but it's useful because it makes people feel like they're part of something. And what we also try and do is do things like as soon as possible support. Like, if someone needs help, how do we solve that right away, as if someone was in a classroom as well? One thing to remember, not everyone wants to be in the classroom. Like, not everyone is that sociable as well. They don't want to take part in some of these features that we have. And that's fine, because we can do things like opting out. And what you have to do is provide tools that let students be sociable if they want to be sociable. Now, some of the tools that we provide, things like Slack and Facebook groups, and obviously kind of like basic stuff, like, they kind of make their own way, and they kind of work out things that they actually want to do within the kind of community. Like, it's not something that we explicitly provide, but it's something that people take and then use themselves. So a good example of this is a meetup happened quite recently, and I had no idea about this. This is in Amsterdam. This is like 6 of our students getting together. There's actually 5 there and 1 taking a picture. And I didn't know about this until they sent me the picture, and it was like, hey, we're all hanging out in a bar in Amsterdam. And I'm like, what? Really? So having these tools to let these people connect, they have a Slack channel called Amsterdam High, which I didn't know about. They made their own channel and did it that way. Just gives them those kind of abilities to make the things they want to do and meet up and hang out. So number 2, how do you think about a worldwide audience? Now, right now, it's around about 3:15 in the Eastern time. So most of you thinking, hey, it's time for the weekend. But if you're on the West Coast, obviously it's nearly Friday at lunch, so it's 11 a.m. But what happens if you're in places like London? And obviously I'm from the UK originally. There, people are getting drunk. It's people all over the streets, and you know, they're just having too much beers. But then if you go to things like Moscow, we have students in Moscow. Now it's 11:15 in the evening. In places like Singapore, people are asleep. So how do you provide these kind of educational platforms for people in all these different countries? For us, most of the courses are video-based and they're pre-made. and they're not live streamed because we can't do live stream that fits everyone's time zone. We have students in 15 different time zones around the world, and there isn't a way to do that without it being pre-recorded. And the idea for that is we want to fit around people's lives. We don't want our lives to fit around them. How do we kind of fit in this way instead? And like I just said, it means that we can support students in 80 different countries around the world. And this wasn't a really, we didn't set out to try and do as many countries in the world, but it just means that because we've done things in this kind of asynchronous manner, it means that we can support them automatically wherever they live. Number 3, now we, just like our students are everywhere in the world, so is the team as well. SuperPi currently is a distributed team, which means a remote working team. We don't really have set hours, and there's 5 of us in 4 countries and in 2 different time zones. And even for a small company, this can work really, really well. And our kind of methodology, if you think about this, is if our students are distributed, then our team should be too. Because if someone is remote working, and remote working is pretty tough, it's a hard thing to do. If we can do this as a working team, then people should be able to do this remote learning in the same way. And because of this, our team has to be incredibly self-organizing. Everything that we do is written down. Like there's no kind of verbal communication apart from things like Hangouts. So everything has to be written down in different places. And we use a ton of different tools to do this. And I just put them up because I thought some of these could be useful if people are using them. So things like Notion is kind of like a wiki, so we have all of our notes all in one place. Figma, all of our design is in one place as well, like everything is in the cloud. And basically, if our designers is working on something, everyone knows where it is. It's in Figma. It's not in a weird place. It's not on someone's laptop. It's all online. Now, some things that we do use, which are kind of like very remote friendly, like you'll heard of obviously Dropbox and things like that, but things like Geekbot is basically a Slack tool that lets you check in and do stand-ups every morning at your time zone. So for instance, in people in the UK, they're doing things, they get this kind of little alert at 10 a.m. in the UK that says, what are you doing today? And then for us in New York, we get it at the same time, 10 a.m. So we get this kind of like stand-up channel that works really well. We can see what everyone else is up to, even though we're not even in the same place or even in the same country as well. And things like 1Password for Teams. Everything is stored in one place, so no one has to ask or wait for someone to wake up and say, hey, what was that password for that login? We have all of these tools, and it's all very kind of remote-based tools as well. And one thing that we try and do is we try and cover as much of the time as students are awake as possible. From 90% of the students, someone is online. Like it's not a 9 to 5 because our team isn't 9 to 5. It's all in different time zones as well. And just to kind of quickly throw in that we are hiring, so just slip that one in there. We are hiring superpi.com/jobs. One thing that we want to do as well is create tools that reach towards beginners. Now, in a classroom setting, it's very easy to be reactive rather than proactive. And what I mean by that is, let's say I'm teaching a coding class and someone has a mistake. Instantly, you can see visually on their face that they're getting a bit of a problem. They kind of get screwing up their face a little bit and looking a bit angry. So you go over and help. Now, in an online way, you don't see that. How do we know if a student is getting stuck? Well, we can't. Online, you have to be really, really paranoid and think what can go wrong? Like, what is the worst thing that can happen if someone is learning a bit of HTML? Or what is the worst thing that happens if someone's learning a bit of JavaScript? Now, with something like design, you can be less paranoid because it's a very subjective thing. With something like JavaScript, if you make one typo, everything breaks. So how do we solve around that? So some of the tools that we've been making quite recently are things like beginner code editors, like similar to things like Glitch. We've made our own, which basically means that we can see problems. There's things like typo support. We've got even things with that little yellow face that kind of highlights if there isn't a header class with the style of white, for instance. So we've got these kind of little things that go all around the code that isn't replicating. It's not Squarespace, it's not drag and drop. They're still writing code, but it basically helps them kind of know where they're going wrong. Things like typos and things like error handling as well. We have all of this stuff built by us. We control these tools. And it means that we can do things like hosting as well. So as soon as they write the code, they have a website and they can put it on a domain and it's live. So we have this kind of flow mapped out really nicely. And it means that our students' learnings are easier without us being in the same room, because we've built these tools on top of all of these kind of programs that go with it. And if you do want to try out the SuperPy editor, just email me, rik@superpy.com. I will give you free access to this, and you can try it out for yourself if you like. Now, number 5 is repetition. Now, when I used to teach in classrooms, teacher burnout was incredibly common and is very real. Now, when I used to teach, I used to be in front of people 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, every single week. And I was just repeating the same things over and over again. Now, one thing I used to do is almost treat it like a set list. I'd have these certain jokes that I'd throw in at certain points in the lecture. And obviously, if you're a brand new student, you'd be like, haha, that's hilarious. For a teaching assistant, if they've heard it for the 12th time, they just roll their eyes. They're at the front, rolling their eyes at my shitty jokes that I say every single week. Now, it is something that gets repeated. Now, one thing that we've tried to fix with that is if a lesson is being repeated more than 3 times, there's ways around to fix that. And with online learning, it does make it a lot easier. So a quick example is we were getting a lot of people asking how do you make collages with JavaScript. And one thing I could do is tell them how to do that. I could be like, here's how you do this, and then someone else would ask, here's how you do this. Third person would ask, here's how you do this. So what we do is we make a quick tutorial, whack it online, and people don't ask that question anymore. We just send them the link and they watch this 15-minute video instead. And it just makes it a lot easier that we're not having to repeat the same things over and over again. So if someone is getting that kind of repetition and you get that and you get the feeling that you're repeating yourself again and again, there's ways to automate it. Things like videos, things like help sections that just kind of make it a lot easier. We're using some of the tools that we use as part of our teaching. Number 6. So branding does matter when it comes to both in-person and online. But we have lots of coding courses, and I like to think of coding as a creative skill, and it's something that's been kind of brought up quite a lot today. But if you look at some of the rivals for us, everything sounds so boring. It's things like Code Academy, Code School, Udemy. It just doesn't feel fun. It doesn't feel entertaining. And if you see some of the kind of branding that comes to us, like in the emails, like, do I really want to learn this stuff if it looks like this? Bunch of guys in a room with some kind of Dells and, crappy monitors. Like, does that appeal to me? And the answer is, it doesn't have to be that dull. It doesn't have to be as kind of dry as a lot of these other companies are making out. And kind of aligned to this as well is things like copy. Branding, obviously, kind of visual design, copy as well. So one thing that we try and do is have a really accessible copywriting. Now, we've basically banned some like overly technical words from our style guide. Now, you can't get rid of some of them. You can't get rid of things like HTML and JavaScript. But there are things that we have banned, like developer and engineer and programming and computer science. And why? They sound too technical for us, where you can just say things like code. People find it's an easier thing to become a coder than it would be to be an engineer or a developer. They can use it. Some people go on and say they do use, like, I am a front-end developer, but we like to just say it on the website as something that's more accessible, as things like code instead as well. But even with things like JavaScript, we even just lowercase the s, like Java lowercase s script, because it feels less technical just by changing that one tiny capitalization as well. And with this kind of branding and copy, we find that representation of our students changes as well. We always want to have things like a safe, open, and welcoming community, and that's true of in-person classes as well. But the thing that we have is people stay in our community. If you're online, people stay within these Slack groups and Facebook groups forever, basically. In the classroom, they will come and then they will leave. So how do you make sure that people still feel welcome after months that they've finished a course? We do things like affordable prices as well. Like we basically have Like, we always try and make the highest price course under $500, and that's compared to other courses that cost thousands. So we always try and make things a little bit more affordable, which means that when we have things like the accessible branding and copy, even on our coding courses, the gender split is something like this. It's 52% female. Like, for something that's very heavily branded across the industry as a code course is usually men, we're actually trying to reverse that in this way. And with this as well, we're trying to do things like scholarships. And this is still open, by the way. If someone wants to apply, you get 10 courses for free if you win. So we have an end of year scholarship as well. It's just on our site at the moment. If you do want to take all of our courses for free, we've been working with some fabulous partners like Figma and Framer to do all of these courses for you. One thing with this kind of community as well is open and honest feedback. Because as a student, you don't want to have that feeling of being asked a stupid question. No one wants to ask a stupid question because they don't want to feel stupid, of course. So one thing that we always try and do is have many, many ways to ask for help. And it's why we ask for help in the kind of intercom, like live support. We have Google Hangout one-on-one sessions. We have Slack help as well. People DM me, people email me. There's lots of ways to ask for help that just makes it less forced into one way of doing things. And this means that we can get many feedback from not just us, but also other students as well. Like, students give feedback on other students' work as well. This isn't just kind of like, here's the fix to your code, but it's also suggestions for things like design tweaks, and maybe you should make the font bigger, and even things like resumes and portfolios as well. People put in their own resume and go, hey, what do you think of this? Like, how could I make this better? And we get all of these kind of people helping each other out. And it's not to do with the code course, it's partly to do with the community as well. Now, the last point is online learning for me gets stronger results. Now, this one is obviously very, very hard to quantify, like what is a better result? And the reason I kind of say this is that my online students have been doing far better work than the previous in-person students. And just to kind of give you a kind of quick overview, some of the students that we've been teaching recently have been winning like top design awards. So things like they were on Site Inspire and things like Hover States, and they're winning top awards. Now, I wanted to kind of quantify why I thought this might be the case. Like, what is it about the online learning space that makes people learn better than if they're in a classroom? So this is kind of my opinion, and I think it's a combo of the few things. So there's less pressure when you're in a classroom to get things done. If you turn up for a week-long course, there's this pressure that you have to do this in a week, and you have to be good at the end of the week, which kind of does the kind of reverse of what people would think. It's like an intensive course doesn't feel like it would get intense results at the end. But it also, by doing it online, it just gives people more time to think. They can sleep on things, and they can just have more time to ask questions. And because we're doing this over a longer period of learning, we do courses on kind of week-based things, so 4 or 8 week courses. But generally, people stay around the community and still ask questions even after the course is finished as well. So it's a little bit like you're buying a 12-month course instead, because you're still being able to ask all these questions. And also, because we've got these better tools in place, it means that they're not asking questions and not feeling like they're getting stuck as well. So again, this is just personal opinion. I might be wrong, but this is kind of why I feel like we're getting good results. Now, as we've just mentioned before, we do have the jobs page open, and we're getting a lot of people applying for these jobs. And you can see the difference between our students and people who've done things like 3-month boot camps. Like, the quality of our students after about 40 hours of teaching is better than 3-month full-time boot camps, which is obviously a lot longer, like 12 times longer than that. So it just feels like people are going to these boot camps and having all these intense experiences there, but not coming out with great work on top of that. And even after, I'm not saying this is true of every college degree or every boot camp, but a lot of our students are actually better than people who've done 3-year college degrees in this stuff as well. And that is a huge difference in price. It's something from $500 to something like $35,000. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is why I hate the title of this event. It's kind of like, I do look like an angry soccer hooligan saying this, so let's just bring up the title of the event. Now for me, this is quite hard to read. Like, this feels like some kind of weird hipster David Rudnick style font going on here. So why I hate the title of the event, based on feedback from students and staff as well. And I don't mean to kind of like throw a bomb in the room and then kind of run out, but I'm going to have 3 strikes for 9 words. Strike number 1. I sent this talk to one of our students called Fiona, and Fiona said, this talk is definitely not for me. And I was like, why though? Like, why? Why is this talk not for you? This is someone who works in the creative industries, who's interested in learning about education, who's done a coding course, has done a design course with us as well. Why is this talk not for her? So that title seems like it's putting some people off who think that this talk isn't for them. Strike number 2. This is one of our employees. This is someone who works for us. This is someone who works at an education design company, and she didn't know what this means. So I'll just kind of highlight that little bit there. I don't know what this word means. And this is someone who works in the industry and is very, very specific to this area. And when I sent it around to a few of the students, someone even said this, like they made a meme about the title of the talk. And it's like, I just wanted to include that because I thought it was quite funny. So strike number 2. Some people don't even know what the event is about just from that word. Like the language is too tough. And strike number 3. Someone said this as well. I had to remove the name because when I asked, they said, don't show my name on there. And the one thing I want to kind of highlight on this is not really inclusive. And the same person who said this said it felt like this meme. It said the who, whom, whomst, and whomsted kind of meme. So some people feel like the coffee isn't inclusive for them as well, which kind of goes back to strike number 1 as well too. And I kind of thought about this meme a little bit more, and I thought, what would be an easier way? Like if we are at the bottom here, how would we go back up to the top? So this is something that I kind of put together in about 2 seconds. So this kind of made it feel a little bit easier and a little bit more friendlier for me personally. Again, it's my personal opinion. And what I kind of felt was like it just got easier and more open the more that we did this. And again, I don't want to kind of drop a bomb in the room and then run off, but I just wanted to make it a little bit simpler for people who would usually be interested in this kind of topic as well. So for us, we have to be more accessible as educators, and we have to be more who than whomsted. Thank you.